I'd gone my entire life believing those lies.
Because you only see the world through your own eyes. So,
And I had not talked to anyone about it.
no
Nobody. I
perspective.
had no perspective. And I
And
was ashamed. The shame was, it was my friend's dad.
yeah,
And that was the shame my entire life, was how could I be that person?
this episode contains sensitive discussion about sexual assault and abuse. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This episode of the I'm a Mindset is going to be about a subject that is very delicate to talk about. It's a topic that is taboo in society, but we believe is a topic that needs to be discussed and something that needs to be brought out into the open, because it, quite frankly, is a major epidemic in our world today. We're going to be talking about sexual assault. We're going to be talking about rape. And we're, in fact, going to be talking about a personal account that Gail has gone through. And we're going to discuss the lessons that have come from that. And we hope that it will be helpful to you, the viewer. Did you know that every 74 seconds, someone in the US is sexually assaulted? And sadly, every 9 minutes, that someone is a child. Did you know that 1 in 5 women in the US has experienced completed or attempted rape during her lifetime? And 1 in 3 of those women has experienced it for the first time between the ages of 11 and 17. Did you know that 1 in 33 men has experienced attempted or completed rape? About 3% of US men have experienced sexual assault. 60% of rapes are committed by someone known to the victim, an acquaintance, a relative, or maybe even a partner. And did you know that only 25% of assaults are reported to the police? Said a study a few years ago in 2018. So truly, Gail, this is a major problem. And it is major also because it is something so secretive and something so full of shame that we don't really want to talk about it. And yet, to avoid or to lessen the impact, we need to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And so I applaud your courage today in wanting to share this. Like I said at the outset, it is highly sensitive, and we do, again, want to tell you that if there's any trigger that you may experience on this topic, maybe this is not the episode for you. But if it in some way helps somebody, I think it will be worth it for us to share. Don't you think? Yeah. So let me first clarify some key terms that we need to keep in mind. These are terms, again, that in some circles are not even mentioned, but I think in this educational video are important for us to mention and clarify. The first term is sexual assault. Sexual assault is any sexual contact or behavior that happens without clear, voluntary, and informed consent. It's about power and control, not desire. And it doesn't require physical violence to be serious. Emotional manipulation, threats, or psychological pressure are just as harmful and just as real as something physically violent. The word rape, again, not a word that we want to be mentioning, but I think it's important to not hold back. It is a specific form of sexual assault. In legal terms, it involves any act of non-consensual penetration, even minimal, whether vaginal, anal, or oral, carried out with any body part or object. So that really clarifies how broad this can be. Mm-hmm. I also want to mention the word force. Now, force does not just imply or suggest physical violence or physical force. Force can also be emotional. It can be verbal. It can be psychological. Perpetrators may threaten, they may manipulate emotions or trust, they may misuse power and authority, and they may even exploit a person's inability to give consent. The word consent is another word I want to clarify before we start. It must be clear, coherent, willing, ongoing. Past relationships, flirtations, or even previous sexual contact or activity does not count as consent for future acts. And lastly, and most importantly, Adult sexual contact with a minor is always abuse. It is always a crime. It is child sexual abuse. Now, with those terms clarified, we do want to begin the story. We don't really want to spend too much time on the introductory material. We've made a clear case that this is a problem, and it's a major problem worth discussing. So, Gail, I want you to keep in mind that there's no shame in surviving, and the shame belongs to the one who did the harming and not to the victim. Are you able to, I guess, just start us off? What happened, and when did this happen in your life?
This was when I was 17. And I had gone over to my friend's house many times and hung out with her family. When I went to her house this particular morning, she was not there. I had skipped school, and I'd gone to see if she wanted to skip school with me and go lay out in the sun. Her dad came to the door and, said she's not here. I told him what I was there for, and he said, well, no big deal. I don't go to work until tonight, so I'll go lay out in the sun with you. I didn't think anything of it. Went in there, got dressed. We went, laid out in the sun, and when we came back a few hours later, he said I could use his room to change back into my clothes. And while I was in there, he walked in while I was getting dressed and proceeded to tell me that while we were laying out in the sun, that I had turned him on, and that he was attracted to me, and he could tell that I was attracted to him, and he proceeded to rape me. And he framed it in a way that it was something I was consenting to.
Yeah. So just before we go into that, we've covered, I guess, a lot of ground leading up to that. How is it that you ended up in that situation? How old was that gentleman roughly? You were 17.
He was 37.
37.
Mm-hmm.
And how is it that you didn't? There was no red flags when he said come in. How come your I guess your
my guard
was down? Yeah, why was your guard down? How do you explain that?
Because he was the cool dad. He was the good-looking younger dad. He wasn't, I guess when you're 17, you think of old parents, gray hair, that type of thing. And he wasn't like that. He was around us all the time, hanging out. He was the cool dad. He was the one that you could have a conversation with. He was younger. He didn't dress like the older parents or anything. So I never thought anything about it. I mean, I never saw it coming.
So you had, I guess, over time become quite familiar. So
very familiar. I'd been to that house many, many times. These were like family to me.
Yeah, yeah. So you'd become very familiar. I mean, that's why you went out and were in the sun together. It was just normal.
We had all laid out in the sun before,
yeah.
So it wasn't an odd thing.
Did you remember having any thought whatsoever that you were interested in that person, or that you were trying to pursue that person, or did this catch you completely by surprise?
Completely off guard, completely. So when he told me that I had turned him on and he gave me explicit detail, I remember thinking, how? I didn't mean to. Oh my gosh, what did I do?
Yeah.
And so, of course, I thought this is something I was doing, and I wasn't aware I was doing it.
And that brings us back to that consent you were talking about. So you felt that you were consenting in a way.
Because I wasn't stopping him.
Yes.
This was not a scary person to me. This was somebody that I trusted, somebody that I'd been around 100 times and had never thought anything of. Things are blurry now, but I'm assuming we spent the rest of the afternoon there because he told me he wanted me to take him to work, drop him off at work, and then pick him up the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, I had school the next morning. So I skipped school that day. And then I was going to have to skip school the next day because now I'm required, is in my mind, I guess. I thought I've got to come back and pick him up. And he told me that, I was only 17. And I guess he thought that the age of consent or whatever was 18. So he told me people wouldn't understand, not to say anything to anybody until after I'm 18. It progressed.
So this turned into not just a one-off.
No, it turned into like a relationship.
Oh,
so
wow.
The next day, I picked him up and suddenly I'm in the middle of a relationship. And he said, don't worry about it. I'll tell my daughter, your friend, and talk to her about it. It got out of hand really quickly, and I was so ashamed of what I had done that I didn't say anything to anybody.
Wow.
So I don't know how many people knew. Of course, my friend was told, and things got a little awkward with us. She didn't hate me or anything. And I later found out that him dating, quote unquote, dating younger girls was very common. He took me one time to his parents' house and they did not bat an eye at my age. Wow. So it was that common.
Yeah. And we have to remember that we're talking 30 plus years ago. So yes. It was a long time ago as well. So you ended up in a relationship. You said you're blurry on it. You don't know how it went from that one situation into a relationship. Looking back now, what was going on in your life that didn't allow you to see those red flags emotionally, psychologically, in your home? What risk factors were there in you at the time?
At the time, okay, let me back up a little bit. So when I was 16, my brother died. My half-brother drowned. My grandfather passed away that I was very close to. I left home, moved in with my grandmother, had a full-time job, and was going to school, going to high school full-time, and was in the band and everything. So I had big things going on when I was 16.
Yeah, like major trauma
Major, yeah. And it was already a very big, scary household. And that's one of the reasons I left and moved in with my grandmother. So I became an adult very, very quickly in my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so fast forward to 17, I'd had one sexual partner. It was not like adults would have. It was my first and only experience. We were both virgins at the time. It was not like what I was experiencing with this man. It was very, very, very innocent and different. And this was very adult stuff that he would say to me that was very uncomfortable as things progressed, things that I was not used to.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to explain.
You had a life that had no boundaries, had
None
a lot of freedom.
Whatsoever.
You didn't have figures of influence that were showing you direction in these areas that you could draw from, like moral faith, to make these decisions. So you were really just a young person exploring, and you were vulnerable.
Very vulnerable, because when I saw him, I did not see big and scary.
Yeah.
Big and scary was at home. If I saw something like what I was dealing with at home, the red flags would have gone up. But this was calm and collect, safe. And the only person at that time that I could count on was my grandmother.
Yeah.
And she and I were very close, but she was not a coddler. She was very kind and very sweet, but she's not somebody you say, oh, poor me with. Yeah. She'll tell you, suck it up and, go on in a very polite and loving way. But it's not someone I could go and say, hey, this is going on. What do you think?
Yeah.
And in fact, my grandmother knew. Of course, I told her about him, and it did not throw red flags her way.
Yeah.
She grew up in a very, very different era where you even married at 14. Very, very different.
So this was a pivotal time in your life. We talked about growing up in households with immature parents a few episodes ago, and emotionally it stunts you. You're looking for love. You're looking for that shelter, that protection, that escape. What you're saying is if you'd seen it coming in a way that was familiar to you, maybe with aggression or anger,
right,
you knew how to kind of negotiate that. But because this came from left field and it came from a place where you felt secure,
right,
a person you trusted, it kind of went under your radar. Is that what you're
right.
saying?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then all these traumas were going on. I mean, 17, that's a very formative and pivotal age for
Right.
anybody. And then how did it impact? How did your schooling go? How did your social life continue after that? What impact did this have on the other parts of your life?
Well, he worked at night, so he would call me and talk to me through the night. It was hard to get up and go to school. I was suffering with my grades and everything. And so um I eventually stopped talking to the friends at school as much and just kind of gradually stopped going to school and quit about halfway through my senior
Wow.
year. It was just more that I could bear. I didn't even realize the impact until I sat here and reflected on it in preparation. But it was a very impactful situation, of course. When he started getting more aggressive and very, very jealous, and jealous about a celebrity or a singer that I said that I liked or whatever, he'd get very
Possessive.
possessive,
Hmm.
jealous, would show up at my work
Wow.
and would aggravate and irritate and everything.
Wow.
So that type of behavior, I believe, is what made me say, okay,
Yeah.
now I'm familiar with this kind of behavior. This is something I fought against it at home in a more aggressive way. So I recognize that. And I think that's what saved me. I think
Eventually. Yeah.
eventually saved me and made me say,
Enough is enough.
enough is enough, get out of my life. I had to ask my boss to tell him to stay away. So
So this man put a lot of stress and pressure on you. He isolated you socially from friends.
he was jealous of even my friend.
He
So
short circuited your
right.
schooling and therefore your career. You weren't able to graduate with your classmates. Is that right?
No, no. And I don't know how many of my classmates realize that because I did go to graduation.
Hmm.
I did have a senior photo and I did sit there in the crowd and cheer them on, but I didn't.
Wow. And then eventually you did get your GED and you got there in the end, but that would have
The summer after I graduated,
that would have taken a
I
lot
got
of
my GED.
it would have taken a lot of emotional energy just to keep up the appearance. And all the while he's telling you, let's keep this a secret, don't tell
He
anybody.
told me not to tell anybody until I was 18
And he
because
told you,
nobody would understand.
this is your fault. You caused this.
Right.
You brought this out in me. You initiated it. It was your decision. He
Well, and see, when I was growing up, everything was always my fault.
Yeah.
I was the oldest in my household. And so it was always my fault. That sounded very familiar. So I was okay taking the blame
Yes.
and absorbing that. My self worth was already
Eroded.
completely eroded.
Yeah.
Um, and in fact, my first sexual experience when my mother found out that I had been sexually active, she called me a whore.
Wow.
So I home was not safe.
Yeah.
Home was not safe. Home was very aggressive
So,
and
to
not
anyone
safe.
that's watching or listening to this, would just realize that you were just a girl with no structure, with no safety net, with no
And very
support,
naive.
with no one to
Right.
kind of run to, with no one to guide you. You were trying to just make the best of it in your world. And someone came in and interrupted your journey for purely selfish reasons
Right.
and then gaslit you to believe that it was about you. And this brings me to the big thing that I want to touch on here. When did you realize that this was, in fact, an assault, that this was a rape, that this wasn't your fault? At what age did you come to that realization? At what point? Was it in your teens, in your 20s?
Um, when I was 50 years old.
When you were 50 years old?
When you and I were preparing to get married, I felt it was essential that I talk to you and tell you. And I had always thought in my mind that I had dated this guy,
Yeah. So
that
you,
this was
one of
one of the
your,
people in
that
my
you dated.
background, yes, that I fully believed it with all my heart, and I took that blame and that responsibility on myself 100%. And
And
until I talked to you and told you, and you explained to me and told me what you did and put it in perspective to me, the penny had not dropped my
wow.
entire life.
I feel that I wasn't able to be the best support at the time because I was going through my post divorce spirals. But I remember when we had the discussion and you mentioned our sexual experiences, I'd only been with one other person, married to that person. And so you felt that you wanted to be honest.
Right.
You told me about a couple of younger boyfriends that, you had serious relationships with in your youth. And yeah, when you mentioned this one, I just felt so angry and indignant for Gail because I immediately could see, having been in ministry as a pastor before and had encountered people with, dysfunction and, in fact, even some abuse and sexual violence issues, and just the knowledge that I had of the Me Too movement and things that had gone on, it was so clear to me. And I think it would have been to you had it not been your own journey and had it not manipulated your thought as this particular thing does to a young person. Don't you
Mm-hmm.
think?
Right.
Yeah, there was a clear imbalance that I saw that Gail couldn't see until she reflected. And what was the thing that really made the difference for you that helped you see it? I mentioned something to you and it helped you see that this was an imbalance. Do you remember that?
I argued with you and told you no, that I was compliant. I did not stop it. So I had been in a relationship, and you said, Gail, what if Clancy, and at the time I think she was 15,
This is your youngest
my
daughter.
youngest daughter, if Clancy was in this situation at 15 by a 35-year-old man, would she be compliant
Or consenting.
and consenting?
And your natural reaction was, I guess, a lot like mine, such anger and indignant that I felt for you. You would feel for Clancy. If she was in this situation, you would have no problems not only identifying this, but also doing your best to protect Clancy from some person like that, right?
I put my baby girl in my shoes at that time, and it was not okay.
It's not okay.
And it would not have been her fault. And that was the first time that I saw that it was not my fault. And it was the first time I cried
Yeah.
about it. That was the first time that I did not own what was done to me.
Wow.
And it was shocking to me
Yeah.
that I'd gone my entire life believing those lies.
Because you only see the world through your own eyes. And so,
And I had not talked to anyone about it.
no, so
So
you had no
nobody, I
perspective.
had no perspective, and
And
I was ashamed.
yeah, shame. You
But the
feel,
shame was, it was my friend's dad
yeah,
that he told me I
yeah,
seduced.
you seduced.
And I thought, how could I be that person?
Yeah.
And that was the shame my entire life was, how could I be that person?
Yeah, just remember what we read at the outset, that this sort of stuff doesn't have to be physically by force. It can be done emotionally, verbally, psychologically, by perpetrators who can manipulate you to thinking that it's actually your fault, that you caused this. And a young mind that's still trying to develop its identity and trying to will likely think, yeah, I'm the dirty one, I'm the bad one, I did this. And till you were around 50 years of age, you believe that you were part of this relationship.
Absolutely. 100%.
So uh, now Gail is sharing this with you, and I want you to be very clear that we don't put this out there easily, because this is a heavy topic and it's heavy for her to have to even share it. And it's been a long journey for her to get to this point of even talking to your family about it. You've had a talk to your girls about this. You've been a little more open about it. And really, this is the first time she's putting it out there publicly. Uh, why? Why now? Why do you feel such a burden to put yourself out there when you don't have to? I mean, you could just keep this to yourself. Why does it burn in your heart to want to share it?
It's been placed on my heart because there has to be a voice for the voiceless. And not to say that I'm the one that needs to put that out there. I just have this in my heart. I feel like God's been laying it on my heart to speak of this because I think there are so many people that felt the way I did
Yeah.
and that aren't speaking up. And it's happening so often. People are so ashamed that they aren't talking about it and they aren't going forward and they aren't getting help. I never got helped.
Yeah.
I stayed silent my entire
Yeah.
life.
And you hear about these things on the news, court cases, legal things, very brave women and men that have come forward to discuss it. And we're not coming at it from the legal perspective, although we do believe that if this is going on in your life and you are underage or there's an imbalance, there is a right to report it, to let somebody know it is important. Our main concern is your emotional and psychological well-being. And when I was looking up the stats for this, I realized that every year there's almost 500,000 women and men that are assaulted or in some way experiencing something like this. And with only 25% of cases reported, and even some of those are not fully reported or not are only partially reported, it tells me that so many more people than what we think have gone through this, are going through this even now. And I think we both feel burdened that this needs to be brought out in the open once and for all
Right.
from an emotional and psychological and spiritual perspective, not just legally. And it doesn't have to put the burden on you to have to go on TV about it or have to, if it happened years ago, it doesn't even mean you have to go and tell the police, even if that may be warranted in some cases. But it still needs to be brought out in the open for you, discussed, brought into perspective so that you don't attach this to your self worth,
Right.
so that you are not enslaved to the effects that this can have on you emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Those are the things that are crippling many people, and many
Right.
people your age, even older, that have gone through this. Now, we're not going to spend too much time on it, but yeah, a couple of years later, you had another incident, and I guess these are the two main incidences in your life where something a little more blatant and I guess narrow one off happened.
Right.
Tell us about that. It was, how old were you? About 19 or 20?
Right. So after that happened and I quit school, I was in a long term relationship with someone, but this
Your
person
age.
that was my age,
Mm-hmm.
but he kept breaking up with me because I didn't have a college degree. I wasn't good enough for his friend. His friend kept telling him to break up,
Which
so
only reinforced what you were telling
which only,
yourself,
yes,
self worth.
because I mean, when I applied for college, I didn't even look to see if I got accepted or not. I had such low self worth that I never even checked or followed up with it after I took the entrance exam.
So you didn't
So
want to face rejection or
right,
fear of
right,
failure.
right. So I'm in a long-term relationship, but like I said, he kept breaking up with me, and I thought this was the one.
Mhm.
So he breaks up with me, and I'm leaning on someone that used to come into my yogurt shop that I worked at. He was a frequent customer, and
With his spouse?
with his spouse,
Mhm. And
for years,
older?
much older than
The
than the
previous.
friend's
Mm.
than the friend's dad. He would say inappropriate things, but I didn't think anything of it. I was very, very naive. Even after he moved away, he got divorced and moved away from the area. He had stayed in touch with me, and even when he was coming through town on business, hey, do you want to go have dinner? And I thought of him as a father figure. I had daddy issues and everything my whole life,
Now we're
parent
talking
issues.
3 times your age.
Oh
Someone
yeah,
who was
yeah,
much, much older.
much much older. Reflecting back, he was making crude comments during dinner and stuff. Still, I didn't think anything of it. So then, fast forward to this breakup. Um, he calls and he said, "Come over here and we'll talk about it." So I went over to his apartment.
And you being very honest, I'm sure you were sharing what was on your heart. This is like a grandfather figure. You're telling him about the breakup and what was going on
Right,
in your
right.
heart, right?
And so I'm laying on the couch just bawling my eyes out, and he tries to undress me. I was like, "What are you doing?" So I fight him off. He eventually takes me into his room. I fight, fight, fight. He tells me that I'm ruining the mood.
Wow.
And so I finally give in. While he's in the shower, I leave. The next day, he calls me and says, "Why did you leave?" And I said, "You're kidding. You took something from me that I can't get back." He said, "You weren't a virgin."
Hmm.
I said, "I was talking about my dignity." I hung up and I didn't talk to him again or see him again. But again,
So he had sweet talked you and acted a certain way. And then after the
oh,
fact,
when I came in, he fixed a drink
yeah.
for
But
us and
once he got it,
everything, was sitting there talking. And then while I was
once,
upset and
yeah.
let my guard down,
So
right,
once he got what he wanted, everything changed. His persona
his
changed.
persona
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
And I saw a side of him I had not ever seen before. And
Yeah.
I had known this guy for years.
Yeah.
It was very shocking. My grandmother was sitting right there when I got the phone call. She was my security my whole life.
Yeah.
She was my unconditional, but not someone that I could say, "Mama, this happened,"
Yeah.
and I would get comfort.
Yeah.
She wouldn't have known how to handle that. So again, nobody my whole life
Wow.
has known about this until I talked to you about it. So I just kept it inside. It was my fault. I put myself in that situation. I shouldn't have gone there. I should have seen the signs. But again, not a big scary situation,
Yeah.
not a big scary guy that you think of when you think of somebody that's going to rape another person. You think it's going to be blatantly
Yeah.
obvious. It's going to be somebody, a criminal
In a dark
in a
alley,
dark alley,
stranger.
not at a residential home,
Mm-mm.
not somebody you know,
No.
not somebody you trust. None of the signs were there.
Yeah.
None. I was a naive kid. I knew that I did not ask for that, but I did blame myself that I put myself in that
Yeah. With
situation.
this one, you were clear that it was, a rape
Right.
situation, but you still found a way to blame yourself for putting yourself in that situation, even though you did not see that coming whatsoever. There was no
Right.
signs. And now looking back, you accepted the invitation. He was talking a certain way. So he obviously had a narrative playing out in his head, in his mind. But again, you weren't even thinking, you were just very honest and very trusting. Even though you had trust broken, you still were very honest and trusting, right?
Right.
Yep,
Right.
yep.
And you and I have been reflecting on why I'm so trusting still.
Yeah.
because I am trusting to a fault with everybody.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense that I would still trust people.
Yeah.
But as I reflect, I think it's because if you break my trust, it's not going to be a big deal. It's not going to break my heart. It's not going to hurt me deeply. The biggest trust issues happen long before anybody that could break them now.
Yeah. Which is a very different way of seeing it. Not everyone's going to be like that. I mean, some people will have massive trust issues
Right.
with people, with men, with women. I know through some of the things I've gone through, I've developed a lot of trust issues. So that was, I guess, a form of resiliency that you've had to build up to be strong and to navigate the world. But at the same time, I mean, you don't notice it, but reading between the lines, it can still leave emotional trauma unaddressed
Right.
and untreated, and you've never been able to seek any professional counseling. We're not saying to continually naively just trust people. We do need to learn, but that was a way that you navigated the world. I've already been hurt. No one can hurt me. No one can break me
Right.
this much because I've already been broken.
Right.
It's still a defense mechanism.
Well, and I never knew about boundaries.
Yeah.
And I've only discovered boundaries
Yeah.
since I met you.
And, Gail's story or her stories are not isolated whatsoever. I go and get my hair cut every few weeks nearby to our house. And my hairdresser tells me, and she said I can mention this, that she has had experiences with clients, customers come in who have been crude in their language. There was a gentleman that was outrightly crude, making sexual advances on her. There was another gentleman that exposed himself to her and everyone in the salon. And I guess, like you, she's very strong and resilient and could just brush it off and laugh it off. These guys are just old, perverted men or whatever. But it goes to show that these things are going on all the time. I mean, I have a daughter who's 25. She tells me that she's aware of behavior that goes on. So it's very possible that you watching this may have experienced something personally in your life or someone that you know. This is something cutting very close to home for many people. And so we want to talk about some of the lessons that you've learned from these experiences that might be helpful for others. You talked about some risk factors that didn't cause you to be a victim or open the door, but it left you vulnerable and open.
Right.
That's what I want to make sure we're very clear. It's not an excuse. There's no excuse for someone to do this to you, but there are some risk factors that we need to be aware of for people that may be prime targets, victims of perpetrators. One of those risk factors that I wanted to mention is relationship to the perpetrator, a familiarity with the person. We mentioned at the beginning that a high percentage, 60% of rapes are committed by someone who is known to the victim, an acquaintance, a relative, or partner. And so we need to be aware of one of the risk factors being people that are in close proximity.
Right.
Either at work or a teacher at school, a person in authority from churches, sadly, or an uncle or someone in your life. These are some of the people. And always keeping the balance that we can't live in fear and suspect everybody. We can't be suspicious of everybody. We do need to recognize that perpetrators may come from familiarity, from places that are places of trust. Right. So that is, I guess, a lesson learned from your experience. Both of these perpetrators were someone that you knew, someone that you trusted. They were actually compensating for a parental lacks or, like father figures who were trying to encourage you to trust them with your thoughts and feelings. And it came from left field. You could never have picked it.
Well, they were grooming me, and I didn't realize they were grooming me.
Yes, and we're going to be discussing that in a minute. But yeah, we're going to talk about this in connection with grooming in just a moment, because that's a very important connection, predators and grooming that happens from these people in close proximity to you. Another risk factor is coming from a dysfunctional family home or dysfunctional family dynamics. We talked about how, your home was not a safe place at times. We've already gone through this in past episodes, that you have a good relationship with your family now, but when you were younger, there were some periods of dysfunction, and that played a part in this, right?
Well, that was big and scary. Home was.
Yes.
These places that these things happened were not big, scary
In
places.
contrast, by
Yes, in
contrast.
contrast, it did not look the same.
Yeah.
So if it had looked the way things did at home, if it had been big and scary, it would have been a red flag immediately. That's something I want to stay away from.
Yeah.
These were not places I wanted to stay away from, that I knew to stay away from.
So one risk factor is that it pushes you to what is perceived to be a place of trust and security that may not be.
Exactly.
Also, at poverty and people that come from places where there's a lot of conflict can kind of push you away from home to fend for yourself and not have boundaries, not have discipline, not have structure. That's often very common with dysfunctional family relationships.
Well, and I lived with my grandmother, and my grandmother, she was very well meaning, and she said, "You're an adult," which that's very loose terminology, because I was 17, well, 16 when I moved out, but I was operating as an adult, someone with a full-time job, going to school, coming and going as I pleased, keeping whatever schedule I pleased. That was all permissive.
And you at that point needed the guidance and needed the structure. And I guess because your brain was still developing, your prefrontal cortex still had years to develop from that point.
Right.
You were still developing your identity. That would be a primary time for some guidance in your life. And we're not just talking about parents, but your support network. It wasn't there. So that is certainly a risk factor. So dysfunctional home can equal an increase in vulnerability. And going along with that, a lack of supervision and isolation.
Right.
Where you're allowed to do whatever you want. You didn't have boundaries around the decisions you were making. You didn't have boundaries on where you were going to go, on who you were going to be with, what you were going to be doing.
There were no expectations.
No expectations.
I could do whatever I wanted to. I could be as successful or reckless as I wanted to be, with no consequences, except to myself.
Yeah.
My grandmother was my unconditional, and she was going to be there no matter what to help me pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
But all the decisions were going to be mine.
Yeah.
And there were no, bumpers along the way to help keep me in line. So,
and as we're going to see in a minute, a predator is going to come along and see you isolated like a little lamb, and a wolf just coming for that lamb, seeing it away from the pack, is another point of vulnerability, another risk factor.
Well, and then the friend's dad isolated me from my friends and kept me isolated, because before that, I don't feel like I was very isolated. I was going out with friends and just being a normal teenager in my eyes. Then the isolation from normal kid things, normal teenager things, I think is what started giving me the red flags. This is not something that I want. This is not the relationship that I want. And so I think that's what helped me to get out.
Yeah. So another risk factor, as well as the isolation, is the power imbalance and manipulation of a young mind. That is also a young person, like we said earlier, is still forming their worldview and their identity. They're very easily manipulated and influenced by someone older. And then finally, the silence, the stigma around this, that no one wants to talk about it. And sadly, the victim blaming. If you are in a situation where people are going to blame you for everything, that's going to leave you more vulnerable, because you were ripe for this person to take advantage of you, because he was only going to reinforce that you are the one, it's your fault. And then sometimes and I was going to mention, in some situations that I've seen, people will come out and explain that something's happened to them, that a step parent or an uncle did this to me. And we've talked about this.
Right.
And people will not believe them and actually blame them and defend the perpetrator.
Right.
And that goes on a lot in our world, especially with those from older generations who can't even imagine this could be true. So this child must be inventing something. And sadly, some people just don't open up, or they just feel that they're the ones to blame. It reinforces that.
Or they shouldn't have been wearing that.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have put themselves in that situation, in the wrong place at the wrong time. Various victim shaming scenarios.
And we have to be
which is
very clear.
So very wrong.
Yeah, we have to be very clear, no matter what a person wears or how they carry themselves.
No.
That is not them asking
Nope.
to be assaulted. It may be something that they need to work on to have boundaries and make better choices, but it doesn't give someone permission to take advantage of that person just because of that. So in talking about those risk factors, because there is a familiarity with the victim, because it can happen to people from dysfunctional family homes without supervision, with isolation, with a power imbalance, and then that are so used to blaming themselves, victim shaming. I guess these are the things that we need to be aware as parents of children with young people in our society, to understand that young people need support and guidance, not for us to just leave them to their own devices.
Right.
Kids are not going to learn structure and boundaries by osmosis, and none of it get it perfectly right. But the little we can do to help a child navigate their lives and their decisions could help them be more aware and see the red flags when they come their way. So those are the risk factors. I also want to talk about grooming and predatory behavior. This is a big one, a very important one that we need to discuss. I've got a couple of things here that we've talked about in learning from your experiences. Number one, predators groom you by giving you excessive attention and flattery. They often tell you how beautiful you are, how seductive you are. They give you gifts. They give you the time of day. You said they called you. There's a lot of buttering up. You saw that. You now recognize that, I guess, as an adult, that happened in your journey.
As I've reflected, yes. Until then, no, I didn't see it.
And from that first experience that was harder for you to identify at 17, can you clearly now see that there was a grooming through flattery and through buttering you up, so to speak?
Right, yes. Yes, absolutely.
The second one was clear, but the first one also?
Well, no, the first one wasn't clear either. It wasn't clear until it happened.
Yes. No, I'm saying
it was
now.
A clear act.
I'm saying now, looking back, can you see that was the
now
case?
I can see in both situations how I was easily groomed.
Yes.
To get to the act. Yes.
So these were things that didn't happen in isolation. They didn't just happen from one moment to another. They were part of a process that got you to that point. Another grooming and predatory behavior was boundary testing, when a perpetrator will say things, joke about things, just test the waters to see whether they can get away with this. Maybe they can get away with more, and then more until they've broken through the barrier, so to speak. Can you see that in your journey where there was some boundary testing with you? With
either absolutely. One of those experiences? Both of them had the sexual ugly talk. And I was never exposed to that. And it made me very uncomfortable, and it sounded very ugly, but it was not something that threw up a red flag to me. It was just, okay, this is how adults talk, I guess. But it's not something I like. So I recognize this is not something I want, but I was very much a people pleaser. So I would have never said, don't say that.
Especially at that age.
Especially at that age. No. Definitely had not found my voice. And I would have never said, don't say that. That's uncomfortable. So those were red flags that I see now.
One of other grooming and predatory behavior goes along with that is desensitization to sexual content. This was another point, but it pretty much goes along with the excess flattery and attention and boundary testing. It always turns sexual when these people have a motivation for self-pleasure. They're not looking for a relationship. They're not looking for something mutual. They are very fixated with one thing and one thing only. So they're going to be trying to desensitize you to sexual content. I have come across people that have shared they were shown material or videos, or there was discussions had or jokes made that were slowly eroding the senses to the point where this was just something that they did.
Well, both of them talked to me about their previous partners. in explicit
Yeah.
detail.
This doesn't just happen in person. This can happen on social media, in DMs. What's DM stand for again?
Direct messaging.
Direct messaging, through Messenger, through TikTok, Snapchat. These are classic places for predatory behavior where people try to take it that direction to break you down, to test the waters.
Well, and it's so easily accessible.
Oh, yeah.
Porn and stuff
yes.
is so easily accessible, and they're putting explicit content into it. May not be overtly explicit. It may be kissing or something in children's movies now.
Yeah.
So it starts off very soft, but it gets to hardcore very quickly in the wrong situations. But porn is completely out of control in our society these days. And of course, back then, I had never seen any kind of materials or anything. I knew of Playboy or something, but it was not it. We didn't have social media back then.
So you're saying that now is the societal.
Now it's so much worse. I think. Yeah.
It's societal, and the fact that porn is such a big deal now, it means that there's got to be a lot more predators out there.
Absolutely.
And again, it's primarily males, but it's not just male predators. There's also female predators. We see on the news often a pretty teacher with a student that's underage.
Right.
The problem has intensified because of the sexual desensitization online, where porn and material of this nature has become so commonplace. A lot of people are messed up mentally, that are putting images and thoughts in their minds, and so they're going to be leading with this stuff, and this is going to increase the incidences of what we've been talking about. Another grooming that goes on, another grooming tactic, but predatory behavior, is manipulation and emotional control. You did not see it until you were 50, but everything that you told me about that so-called relationship was very much a control situation. It was very much about manipulation. And I found this material. Now, there's a website, RAINN, RAINN.org. These guys are an anti-sexual violence organization in the United States. And then there's another one, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, NSVRC. A lot of our facts and statistics have come from these websites. The RAINN website talks about grooming, and it's interesting, a couple of things that it says. There's a lady called Michelle Denault that is quoted. She's a survivor of sexual violence, and she's now a public speaker and advocate, so she knows firsthand. She's quoted there as saying, as a teenager, she was groomed and sexually abused by one of her high school teachers. So now she helps parents and students and community leaders understand how grooming works. Quote, she says, when a child is groomed to fall in love with their abuser, they don't think they're experiencing abuse. They think sexual activity is the next natural step. It doesn't feel scary. That's exactly what you said. It doesn't feel awkward, but it is abuse. She adds, for tweens and teens who are developmentally wired to seek emotional connection and explore identity, love based on grooming can be especially confusing. Abusers may frame the relationship as a secret romance. That's what happened to you, that others just wouldn't understand. So don't tell anybody. No one will understand our secret love. And then lastly, adolescents who are groomed often believe they are in control. Abusers manipulate them emotionally and psychologically to think that they're mature beyond their years, that they're irresistible, that they're even seducing the adult, which is what happened to you. And in these love grooming situations, the kid being victimized truly believes they're the ones driving the relationship, Denault explains. They're constantly being told that they're irresistible, beautiful, seductive. They're the ones in control. And yet this is a form of coercive control by the older adult and in balance with a young person. The website also goes on to talk about the age of consent and how, yes, there are different ages of consent around the United States, around the world, but this is just a legal thing. The real issue is power and exploitation, not just age. Even if something is technically legal, it may still be harmful, abusive, or predatory. Let me say that again. Even if something is technically legal, it may still be harmful, abusive, or predatory. Non-abusive relationships are rooted in mutual respect and freely given love and consent. When someone leverages their age, their authority, their life experience to override those principles, it's a red flag every time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when there's a major imbalance with someone much older, with someone much younger, that's why when there's an imbalance with someone in authority or power, like a leader, a church leader, or a teacher, or someone that is in a position of authority, that is an imbalance. That may not be illegal, but it's still very much an exploitative situation, because that's not how relationships happen.
Right.
Relationships happen with mutuality. People fall in love. People are on an equal level. Whenever that is out of balance, it is a very big red flag. I want you to think about that. And why do gaps matter? Because children and teens' brains, boundaries, and sense of self is still developing. Adults and older adolescents have the skills to manipulate developmental imbalances in ways that peers cannot. So when there is an age difference, there can be often an imbalance in where each other are at. And that's why the age of consent is not just the measure. We have to look at other factors that are wider than that.
Right.
Yeah. So in summarizing, I guess, the grooming and predatory behavior, I want us to keep that in mind. Watch out for the flattery. Watch out for the attention seeking, the gifts, the compliments from someone that is not naturally someone that you may be dating or seeing, someone from left field or someone that you trust. Watch out for that boundary testing, for the sexual desensitization, sexual content. Watch out for manipulation and emotional control. Watch out for isolation that the perpetrator does to get their victim. Lastly, I want to just shift to healing, because I believe it is just amazing how resilient, how strong, how courageous, how articulate, how intelligent, how creative, how beautiful you are. Given all of these factors, what made the difference in you? How were you able to navigate? What would you put it down to? The healing. How did you find healing with these things?
I think it's only by the grace of God, because me detaching and disassociating from those situations saved my life.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
For me to carry the ownership of those two things that could have broken me, I think is what saved me. And had I lived in that headspace at the time, then I would not have survived.
Yeah.
There's no way I would have survived, because at that time I didn't feel like I had anybody. So stopping life and dealing with it was not an option for me.
Yeah.
So I think it's only by the grace of God.
And frankly, this is not a religious channel. The I'm At a Mindset is dealing with issues of self-worth and emotional maturity, but it's undeniable in your experience, and you can only talk about your own experience, that your faith played a massive role. One major legacy that your grandmother and grandfather left you. What do you call it? Mama, papa? I can't say those words.
Mama and Papa.
Let me try. Mama and papa.
Give it up.
No, I can't say it. Your grandmother and your
Yes.
grandfather, what were their names?
Lola and Bobby Clay.
They left you a tremendous legacy, because in their dysfunction, they were introduced to God, they were introduced to church, and they started making sure that you went to church.
Right.
And eventually, long story short, your faith in what that told you about yourself, your identity, the guidelines of the Bible, of the commandments, of the expectation that God has for a happy and healthy life, the unconditional love of Jesus, the forgiveness, the grace, and then the community that a church offers you, and all those things started to really guide your decisions, to where eventually, when you were married and you had your children, you started making some pretty decent choices because of your faith in creating some boundaries in your life. It taught you about morality. We talked about it in our relationship, the importance of not having sex before marriage because it was important to respect yourself
Exactly.
and wait for that right person. These things you just don't learn by osmosis on the streets and in society, but you got them from your faith. And
Right.
that's
Jesus
worth,
was my constant.
say that again?
Jesus was my constant.
Yeah.
Even when my life didn't look like God was anywhere in it, I knew in my heart Jesus was my constant.
Yep.
God was still in my life, even if it was just him and me in a closet, me talking to him about my problems. God and Jesus was always there, always.
And what it did for your self-worth, which gave birth to this podcast from the beginning, that society and the brokenness that we experience in society and all of the stuff that we've been talking about does not really give you that foundation for self-worth. It is just sink or swim, trying to navigate your way through life. And it's not until you really step back and realize that there is an inherent worth in you as a person.
Exactly.
It's a God-given worth. It really is a game changer. And then the fact that your faith has put in your heart a desire to turn what is a trauma into a testimony, into a story to share with others, that level of altruism and desire to help others, again, is informed by your faith. So I know religion can be messy for some people and can be a turnoff, but in terms of your faith and what it did for you, we can't not mention that as a significant factor
Oh,
in your
absolutely.
healing.
And God is the reason that I wanted to share this,
Yeah, exactly.
because I believe God has been putting it on my heart to help others that feel like they've gone through the same things and maybe even worse.
Yes.
And they've not recovered. They don't feel like they have a voice, and they need to know that they matter and their lives are worth something.
Yes. Our emphasis, like we said earlier, is really about you and where your heart is, and just sharing that it may take time, but there is healing and restoration
Right.
that is possible for your self-worth and for your dignity.
Exactly.
For goodness sake, for your dignity and your self-worth, it takes time, but there is restoration. So some of the things we want to leave you with on healing is we need to replace the lies with truth about who you are, that you're not dirty, that you're not to blame, that you are worthy, and that you are special, and that you do have something to offer, and that this doesn't define you,
No.
and that this was something that was done to you and that you weren't responsible for. If it happened in this way, the dirt doesn't stick to you. And that's important, to replace those lies with truth.
Exactly.
Also, there's an importance here to find healing through support. Now, you didn't have a lot of support at that time, but you eventually found it through your church family and your grandparents and maybe some others and each other. But it is important to seek out safe support, safe people. They need to be appropriate people given the subject matter and what we spoke about today. Therapy is very appropriate, especially
Yes.
a clinical psychologist, someone who understands this form of trauma, this form of assault. So getting the right therapy, the support from safe people, same sex, wiser, older people in your life, and of course, faith and community is very important. That can really give you the network that you need to process. Also, we want to mention the turning the pain into a purpose, looking for ways to help others, and turning the attention away from any form of hopeless victimhood to rising above through strength to help others that may have gone through this as well. And the importance of setting boundaries to protect your mind, especially through what we watch online, setting boundaries with your body, what you allow other people to do with your body. There has to be some clear boundaries. This is my body. You're not allowed to do that to me. We promote, of course, healthy marital relationships, but anything that's inappropriate or outside of that, your body is sacred to you and to God. Boundaries around your heart, emotional boundaries, and just learning to say no, and that it's okay to say no.
It's okay to say no.
So boundaries is another important part of healing. And lastly, we want to celebrate progress, celebrate the wins, celebrate the steps forward. They may be incremental, but celebrate those moments of triumph, because these things that happen to you are part of your story, and they have shaped you to be the strong, resilient person that you are. So celebrate what you've learned through this and how you've become stronger and the difference that you're making or that you can make. Certainly want to encourage people to be courageous enough to go online on a YouTube perhaps and help others through their story. You don't have to put all your secrets out there, but you certainly can help someone that may have gone through something that you have gone through. In closing, and did you want to mention anything else here?
No.
Nope. So
Can't think of anything.
in closing, I just want to mention that there is support that you can seek online. I mentioned earlier the RAIN organization, RAINN. They have a 24-hour support line, helpline, the biggest in the United States. Their number is 1-800-656-4673. Again, 1-800-656-4673. 24/7, they're open. In fact, they get their most important phone calls at 3 a.m. in the morning. There is someone there at all times to support you, and that's an important resource. Their website, rain.org, RAINN.org, is a wealth of information on this subject and where to get more support. And again, the other website that I mentioned earlier, the NSVRC, nsvrc.org, and there's more material and support there as well, resources. So remember, what happened to you is part of your story, but it is not your identity. Healing doesn't erase the past, but it gives it new meaning. It reframes your future. And again, you are not the problem. You are not the problem. You are not dirty. You are worthy. You are full of value. You are whole, and you are becoming the person that you were meant to be. So we thank you again for joining us on the I'm At a Mindset podcast. This was a pretty raw and intense podcast, but we hope that it was helpful and useful to you. We hope that it is life-changing for you. Don't forget that you can share, you can like, you can subscribe so that this material can get out to others that may need to hear this as well. Thanks for joining us. The I'm At a Mindset podcast is a resource for you. See you next time. Bye from me.
Bye for now.